Hey everybody, welcome to Mondays with Mike. I appreciate so much you tuning in for the live stream or watching it on YouTube or Facebook Live or whatever other means you're watching this. Today, you got a couple of things we're going to talk about here. First of all, it looks like some much needed rain is headed our way. Also, lots of people asking, why is it so windy? And so I want to talk a little bit about wind and why it has been so windy, and then a little bit about the ongoing drought and some of the latest updates we have. And also, I thought maybe we could chat a little bit about Earth Day, which took place on April the 22nd, just last week. So let's get into it. So behind me, a little discussion of wind, why it's been so windy around here recently. This is the situation as it was over this past weekend. And so what we had was a very familiar pattern that we've had recently. We have a strong area of low pressure here that moved out of the Rocky Mountains. This one, in fact, brought heavy snow, again, late season heavy snow to the Dakotas, and even prompted blizzard warnings for the second week in a row up there in North Dakota and Montana, parts of South Dakota. So pretty crazy considering that we were in the middle and upper 80s. But these areas of low pressure, think about it this way. When we talk about high pressure and low pressure, it's just as if you were pushing on something. Let's say you're trying to move your wife asks you, or maybe your husband or significant other says, hey, move, I need you to move this couch, okay? So what do? You got to push on it, right? So you're applying pressure to one side of it, and as a result, it moves. This is like Newton's laws, actually. So you apply a force, and it causes an acceleration. And so that's exactly what's happening here. So you have a greater air pressure over here in the Carolinas, and then you have much less air pressure here over Nebraska. And so in between the two, the air wants to move. It's being pushed, it's being accelerated, and needs to move. Now, if the Earth weren't spinning, it would just blow straight from here to here, and you would just have a lot more things would change if the Earth weren't spinning, but you would just have wind or whatever you were pushing blow from one direction to the other. But because the Earth is spinning, there is a force or it depends on what's called your reference frame. But at this reference frame, there's a curve that looks like it's applied to the air called the Coriolis force. And so that's why you have hurricanes that spin counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere and so forth. But in this case, it brings a south wind to Texas, muggy south breezes to Texas, and it tends to bring things like a fire danger to West Texas and to the nation's midsection. And it's all because of what's called a pressure gradient. Well, what in the world is a gradient, right? Well, think about it as if you were rolling a ball down a hill, okay? So the steeper the hill is, the faster the ball is going to roll down the hill. If it's really steep, it's gonna roll down really fast. And so the steeper your pressure gradient, that's actually called a gradient, how fast a hill goes down or how fast a hill goes up is a gradient. This is the same thing. You can kind of think of the H as the high part of a hill, and the L is a low part of the hill. And so just like water wants to flow downhill, or if you roll a snowball down a hill, it rolls downhill. The wind kind of does something similar. So in this case, that's what's one of the reasons why we've been so windy lately. And it's not that this pattern doesn't move, it does move. This low is going to move out, and then there'll be another one coming in, but that's been the overall pattern that we've seen, sort of wave after wave, ripple after ripple of these areas of low pressure moving to our north. And by the way, they've stayed far enough to our north that we haven't had that much in the way of rain, which sort of brings me to the next subject, which is the fact that there's been ongoing wildfires. Now, here in Texas, we had some early spring, kind of late, I think it was late winter, early spring, wildfires up around, just to the Fort Worth area and out around Abilene, Texas, and San Angelo, and those spots had some really serious fires, most of which have been either put out or completely contained at this point. But now the focus is over Arizona and New Mexico, where they've been in the midst of a drought. Obviously, it's always dry over there, but they've been abnormally dry, and then you've had these high winds, 50 or 60 mile an hour winds at times, and we've had a lot of fires breaking out in New Mexico and in Arizona. There have been some evacuations taking place because of this large fire to the north of El Paso, not too far away from Roswell, New Mexico. And then one of the biggest ones is out here. So here's Flagstaff, Arizona, to the north of Phoenix. 32, at least as of this past weekend, 32 square miles has burned. And it's been very dangerous. I mean, there's been evacuations and, the whole nine. And so they're trying to get this under control, but they've had a hard time, the firefighters, because of the wind and the dry air that's been in place. So this is, one of the big weather stories really across the country, in addition to the fact that the Dakotas just had another, foot or so of snow dumped on them with the latest blizzard. Now, one of the things that would help is obviously if we got some rain. But at this point, the new drought numbers were released on Thursday. These come out Thursday morning. We had a new update from the USDA, and actually comes out of the University of Nebraska too, UNL, Nebraska at Lincoln. They're the primary university that puts this together. And the drought monitor here around Texas shows that south of Dallas, really like Waco and San Antonio, and then especially west of those areas, west of I-35 and heading out to West Texas, we have the worst drought that we've seen in 10 years, 11 years technically. Going back to 2011, we haven't seen conditions really this bad. And so, as we talked about in last week's Mondays with Mike, it can create a lot of problems for ranchers and for ranchers who are trying to raise cattle. Costs them a lot more money to keep the cattle alive and fattened up. It can cause crop damage. It can cause, it's going to cost you a lot more money to irrigate the fields. It's just a lot of problems that could potentially happen. And also New Mexico is in the midst of this drought as well. And then it spreads off toward the north and, into Oklahoma and Kansas too. So this has been a pretty wide-ranging drought that's been affecting the south and southwestern part of the U.S. Specifically, locally for us, it is Galveston County, Chambers County, Brazoria, parts of Matagorda, heading out to parts of Fort Bend, Wharton, and Colorado County. And a lot of this actually is areas that have just sort of missed out on recent rain. And we have had a lot more rain off to the north of Houston, which is why this area here, like the Woodlands and heading up to Conroe and Willis and those spots, you're just considered yellow, which is abnormally dry. But in Harris County, much of the county now is in a moderate drought, but really this is the more serious area. And so this is something that if we don't get significant rain between now and the summertime, it's much more of a problem in the summertime, obviously, because we get so hot. And if we get under one of those heat domes, one of those areas of high pressure that tends to linger for a while, you could really run into some problems with the drought, leading to things like burn bans and where you're not, the county judge says you're not allowed to burn outdoors. It can lead to water restrictions, and if Lake Houston starts running low and things like that, which is our primary source of water. Also, there's agriculture. You have rice. Rice is grown out here. There's all rice fields out there. So that's a problem if you don't get any rain. We have, down in this area, and y'all that live down there know it better than I do, I'm sure, but cotton and grass, like sod, is grown down here. I actually have a friend, Michael, who his family owns a big grass farm down in Bay City, and he's got a grass business. And when there's a serious drought or a big heat wave, they get hit really hard because the grass just dries out and you lose that crop, you lose all that money. And incidentally, because I like talking to people about things that I know nothing about, like growing grass. And if you saw my lawn, you'd know that that's true. But so they grow grass and they also grow cotton. And if it's too dry, obviously that's a problem. If it's too wet, that's also a problem, because if you get too much rain, they can't harvest the sod because the fields are all muddy. So they have this big piece of equipment that kind of cuts the grass from underneath and lifts it up so that it forms those sheets of sod that we've all seen. And if it's too wet, you can't do that. And also if it's too wet, the cotton crop gets ruined. And It's more complicated than that, and I can't quite remember, but it's not just cotton, the fiber, that's valuable. There's also cottonseed oil that I think can also be affected if it's too rainy. I don't know if it goes rancid or you can't harvest it at the proper time. Anyway, the farmers know what they're doing, but weather plays such a huge role, whether it's too wet or too dry. So we want to try to keep it in the middle. At this point, we're definitely running on the dry side of things. So the next thing I wanted to show you is rainfall, and it does look like today, if you're watching this on Monday, if you're not watching it on Monday, then this is old news, but it does look like we're going to get some much needed rain across the area today, tonight, early Tuesday. If you're watching this after this, you can go back and see if we were right, but definitely some much needed rain across the area. And finally, last week on the 22nd, we had Earth Day. And, I think Earth Day is maybe, means different things to different people. I know that the holiday was started in 1970, and it was following a decade in which, obviously a tumultuous time in the 1960s, but a time that the environment became much more of an issue that people talked about. There were a lot of industrial things that changed around the world through the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. Things like pesticides and herbicides and all you have to do is ask any older person in your family about Agent Orange, which was an herbicide that was a deforestation chemical that they used in Vietnam. And so there are all these things that were put into the environment. And there was a book that came out called Silent Spring, which had to do with the fact that insects were disappearing. Everything, what used to be a loud, field is now quiet because these insecticides that we were using were killing everything. And so anyway, with all of this coming to the forefront in the 60s, this senator from Wisconsin, Senator Nelson, who was also a governor, proposed this holiday, Earth Day, and anyway, he was successful, and it began in 1970, and ever since then, I think it's mainly just served to remind us to take care of the planet. Now, unfortunately, don't get me started on this, but this has all become highly political, and I think, though, that it doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum or who you voted for president or anything like that. We all want a clean environment, and I think we all want to do the least amount of damage possible, and we all want to not cause animals to become extinct or plants to become extinct. I mean, I think everybody wants that. It's just a matter of how do we do that. And I know that, everybody's impatient on kind of both sides of the argument. And I guess there's reason to be impatient, right? If it looks like some of the things that are happening are going to be causing some damage in the short term, maybe hard to reverse damage, then yeah, I could understand the urgency, right? But we're going to have to meet somewhere in the middle. That's just my opinion. This is not me, talking necessarily as the weatherman. This is me talking as one human being to another. We're going to have to meet somewhere in the middle, because on one side, I think that people are afraid that a lot of times the talk of environmental, taking care of the environment very quickly turns into very, very large government bureaucracies. And in the worst cases, again, my personal opinion, not Fox's opinion or anybody else, my opinion, is that anytime you start talking about any world governments, okay, if you have some unelected billionaires in Europe who are going to decide for the entire world what you're going to do, you're going to get resistance to that. And I don't even care where you stand on it. You're going to get millions of people, especially in America, saying, no, We didn't elect you. We don't even know who you are. World Economic Forum. You could Google that. On the other hand, we're going into a period now with inflation and with high gas prices that we're going to start drilling again, and that's really the lifeblood of a lot of Texas, right? I know that. I do think, though, that the oil companies, I know Chevron and some others, are taking more of a look at being more environmentally conscious, even when it comes to drilling and fracking and producing petroleum products. So I think it is getting better. It should get better faster. Everybody would like to snap their fingers and have it get better instantly. But I think we are making progress. It needs to be a little bit faster. I think if we can maybe try to not hate each other so much, and if our politicians, who are supposed to be leaders, would stop trying to score political points and just get together and meet some kind of compromise in the middle so that we can at least do something. Because we can't all afford to buy Teslas. I would love to buy a Tesla. Can't all afford to do it. Something's got to be done. And if everybody's just fighting, trying to score political points, it's not going to get done. So those are my thoughts on Earth Day. Got to be a moderate. I don't know why there are no moderate people anymore. Everybody's, whatever. So anyway, on that note, let's see. Let me try to end on a happy note here on Mondays with Mike, because I don't want to cause any controversy. I don't want to get all political. Still need help with Pippin. Still need advice with Pippin the dog. He's crazy. Loves his bone. He'll start growling at you if you even look at his bone. So I think he's got some sort of an anxiety issue, or like a fear, that he has. But he's a good boy. He's a sweet doggy. He's getting a little belly on him too. He's starting to get a little pudgy. Jelly's doing good. He's got a big belly. As he gets older, he's 9 years old, Jelly the cat. And by the way, you could follow them on Instagram too. We have little baby Pippin and Jelly the orange kitty. Or maybe it's Jelly Bean the orange kitty. But anyway, you can look them up on his, or you can just go to my Instagram, which is Fox26Mike, and all I do really is post pictures of the animals. Let's leave on this note, because this is a fun thing that came up between me and Sally and Lena last week, during Wake Up with Sally, Mac, and Lena. And the subject was Instagram filters. And the idea that, like what I said was, you could do whatever you want. I mean, you could make yourself look like a clown if you want to. I don't care. It's none of my business. But, the topic that we were saying is, our mantra was, we know. I mean, if you post a picture of yourself that doesn't look like yourself at all, like, we've seen you. We know that that's a crazy filter. We know. Just know that we know. And also, small part of me, just a small part of me, thinks it's a little bit unhealthy for kids to look at that, and for other adults that maybe have low self-esteem to look at this ideal, and maybe the kids are too young to realize that nobody looks like that. That's just me. But again, that's up to the parent, I know. And I do tell my girls that, like, what you're seeing in a magazine or what you're seeing on Instagram, that's not real. That's somebody who took 500 pictures of themselves, picked the best one, filtered it, and then posted it. So always keep that in mind. Stay strong, everybody. Thanks for tuning in for this edition of Mondays with Mike. And I will see you on TV, and I'll see you next week.